Hello people, and welcome back to another City Skylines tier video. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today we are going to have a look at the content creator packs, and I'm also going to bring in the stadium's visual pack into this list as well, just so we can place it somewhere. But mainly we'll be focusing on the 8 content creator packs that have been released for City Skylines. So content creator packs, they kind of function as micro DLCs and very much focus on adding very unique assets into the game. And there are some really good ones here as well. Before we do get started, just a quick thank you for all the support on these tier videos. You guys are really enjoying them. I really appreciate that. And I'm happy to make them. And we have had a few requests for a vanilla map tier list as well. We'll definitely do that. But either way, let's get started with ranking the content creator pack, shall we? And we'll start out here with Art Deco. I'm going to pull this into a healthy B tier. So the Art Deco content creator pack adds in 3 new uniques, 6 residential and 6 commercial buildings, and was developed by Matt Shroomblade Crooks. And it very much does what it says on the tin. It adds in very kind of Art Deco looking assets, which of course is a kind of visual arts and architecture movement, which actually appeared in France for the first time before the First World War. And I'm going to put it middle of the road because it is quite a specific looking DLC, and some of their assets can be quite hard to place at times, but with the 3 uniques that were added, the Eddie Cavanago building, the Pinal Street and the Majesty, have all become pretty solid additions into my Skylines. Even though they do have a very distinct visual style to them, you can usually get away with placing them in downtowns. And the 6 commercial buildings that were added, the Central Hotel, the Chirp Cinema, the Ice Cream Parlour, the Laundromat, the Radio Station and the Starlight Hotel, of course all continue to follow that very Art Deco theme and are nice additions into our commercial areas. And the residential buildings actually make some really nice repeated patterns. We've used them a few times in my series, especially the little kind of blue 2-story apartment ones. They have a very distinct kind of condo vibe about them, and they are nice. The reason I'm kind of putting it middle of the road is again because it is a very distinct, unique style, but it's by no means a bad content creator pack. Definitely worth picking up, but probably not the first one you should grab. So for me, it's going to go middle of the road B tier. Next up on the content creator pack tier list is Bridges and Piers, and for me, this absolutely goes into a must buy. So this was developed by Andreas Amesto Cortina, and it adds in 7 unique roads, 3 train tracks, 2 pedestrian bridges, and 14 types of keys. This pack is amazing for those that really like detailing. The amount of variation we get alone with the keys makes this pack worth picking up. I'm a huge fan of Bridges and Piers. Great content creator pack. The bridges are also really nice as well. We kind of get 3 variations of American and 3 variations of European, all of which have this very nice stone texture to them. Makes a huge difference in kind of your bridge networks, especially with the American Truss Bridge and the 2-lane European Bridge are 2 of my favourites. The train tracks, honestly, I haven't found much use for the 2 one-way tracks that were added. The European Rail Bridge 1 and 2, but the high-speed rail viaduct looks really good. Although it should be mentioned that they don't look any different when they're on the ground. It is only as they're elevated with the train tracks that you see the difference. And likewise with the new pedestrian paths as well, the American pedestrian bridge is really good. And a similar story with the European pedestrian bridge. I haven't really found a way to use this effectively yet. Its pillars are a little bit awkward to cross over roads, but maybe you guys have found a good way to use it. For me, I'm still kind of testing the best way to kind of place this type of elevated pathway. And again, they only take on their new skin once they're elevated. When they're on the ground, they still function as a regular vanilla walking path. But for me, the real meat and potatoes of this content creator packs comes with the piers. We get a whole brand new seawalls, which pedestrians can actually walk on, so they're functioning as walking paths as well. And pre-bridges and piers, the only things we had to decorate waterfronts were the vanilla keys, which, whilst they have their place and are slightly more industrial looking, having the ability to decorate especially really heavy commercial waterfronts and kind of waterfront parks with these new types of keys makes a huge difference to how our cities actually look. So if you're kind of looking to change up the aesthetic of your city, Bridges and Piers does it really well. So for me, if you're without Bridges and Piers and you like detailing and taking time to add all these little intricate details onto the waterfront, especially the piers and the new bridges, make a huge difference to that. So Bridges and Piers, 100% a must buy content creator pack for me. Next up we have European Suburbia, and this is going to go into A tier for me. So the European Suburbia pack was developed by modder Samantha Avanya Woods and brings in 81 new residential buildings, which are very much inspired from European cities in England, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands. You kind of get a general vibe for them once you see them. And there's nothing really wrong with this pack. It is very much residential focused, and in my opinion, the assets that are added with this pack are much more realistic residential buildings, even towards their level kind of 4s and 5s. And I think we can mostly agree a few of the base game vanilla residential assets, once they hit their level tiers, they kind of become maybe a little bit too eccentric, too futuristic. Maybe that's just my opinion. So if you're looking to keep a very realistic looking suburb, European Suburbia is great for that. I'll keep it out of must buy because it is only residential buildings. There's no commercial or no uniques that are added with this pack, which isn't a bad thing. It's still a really, really good content creator pack. I use it all the time. I actually kind of prefer the European Suburbia assets now because I just find some of the base game residential assets a little bit too wild, I think is the right word to use. Maybe that's just because I'm from this side of the world and the residential assets here speak a lot more to me, but you can certainly get away with placing them in American themed cities or Australasia or kind of Far East Asia. They're definitely not out of place there, even though they are very much European themed. So European Suburbia, really good content creator pack, adds a lot of new visual assets into the game, which is always appreciated. So very strong high A tier for me. Next up, we have the high-tech buildings content creator pack, and for me, this is going to go into A tier alongside European Suburbia. So this pack was developed by Mauro Voss, and again, kind of does what it says on the tin. Adds in 8 new unique buildings, which are the Electric Car Factory, Nanotechnology Centre, the Research Centre, the Robotics Institute, the Semiconductor Plant, the Software Development Studio, the Space Shuttle Launch Site, and the Television Station. And we also get 2 new park assets, which are the Biodome and the Vertical Farm, and then also 5 new service buildings, which are the Cryopreservatory, the Faculty, Intelligence Agency, Medical Laboratory, and the Wave Power Plant. So all the assets that are added with this content creator pack very much follow its theme. They're all very high-tech looking and can work in a variety of different scenarios. I often like including these assets within kind of dedicated power plant builds or very much scientific areas. Their assets are also quite big as well, so they work nicely in downtown settings, which is always nice to kind of vary up our skylines a little bit more. The 2 parks that are added, the Biodome and the Vertical Farm, again 2 very distinct looking buildings, and I've actually used these as part of kind of farm areas. So rather than just developing a farm to be a farm, I kind of tried to take it in more of a hydroponics facility vibe, and these assets really helped with that. And then likewise, as I mentioned, with some of the unique buildings like the Nanotechnology Centre and the Semiconductor Plant, all work really nicely alongside power station assets, especially like a nuclear power plant. And the Cryopreservatory building is really nice. It's a much more aesthetically appealing crematorium. And again, the Medical Laboratory, really good looking asset. With the Faculty building, it does function as higher education, but with the campus DLC, you almost never use this building. And even if you don't have campus, the base game universities and the Green Cities University are still nicer looking assets in the Faculty, so I haven't really used it that much. So again, if you're looking to add a bunch of new unique buildings into your unique buildings tab and want that very high-tech theme with them, then of course the high-tech buildings content creator pack is going to be for you. I use this pack a lot, so if you're not a fan of the high-tech vibe, this would probably fall a lot lower down on the list for you. But for me, I use these assets all the time in pretty much every city that I make, so it's a really strong A-tier contender for me. Next up is the Modern City Centre creator pack, and this is going into a must-buy for me. So the Modern City Centre pack was developed by Jason Ditmars, and adds in a brand new total of 39 new high-density commercial assets. To actually get these assets to spawn, you need to paint out a district and then change that district style into Modern City Centre. And just the assets that are included with this make an enormous difference to downtowns. Again, kind of a similar story with the European Suburbia pack. I'm not a huge lover of a lot of the high-density commercial assets. They're kind of plastered in awkward neon signage. And the Modern City Centre takes away all that and adds in much more realistic, funnily enough, Modern City Centre buildings. There are some wonderful repeated patterns in here, especially with the 4x4 kind of Parisian looking ones. I've used these up against a waterfront. You can go into kind of Plot the Growables or Rico and organize these buildings to create layers of depth along the street with these assets, which looks really, really great. And for me now, I can't really imagine building any kind of high density or downtown area without using the modern city centre stuff. It's a much more aesthetically appealing high density commercial alternative. So if you're kind of bored of that neon sign plastered high density commercial that we get with the base game, Modern City Centre totally changes that and rips it all out for some much nicer and much more realistic looking assets. And as kind of a very detail and aesthetic focused player, this pack really appeals to me. Could be lower for some people, but makes a huge difference to the downtowns and especially the skylines. Assets look wonderful at night time. So Modern City Centre is an absolute must buy in my opinion. Next up is Pillars of the East, which is technically a cosmetic pack rather than a content creator pack, similar to Stadiums, but we'll include it in this list anyway, just so it's somewhere in one of these tier lists. I can't really put this into Passable because it's a free DLC and was released as the 2nd anniversary for Cities Skylines as a little gift and a thank you to players. So I'm going to put it into C tier. You can't really pass on it because it's free. It doesn't do that much. It only adds in 3 new unique buildings, which are the Panda Sanctuary, the Oriental Pearl Tower, which I believe is modelled off the tower in Shanghai. That could be wrong, please correct me if it is. And the Temple Complex. And the assets are all very, very heavily Asian themed. And it can be quite hard, especially in the unmodded game, to build an authentic Asian city. I have managed to use the Panda Sanctuary and the Temple Complex as kind of larger central park builds. For those following my Novaria series will know exactly how we use these. But the Oriental Pearl Tower stands out like a sore thumb in unmodded cities, at least in every instance I've seen it used. And we also had a new tree added as well, which is the bamboo, which again does have its place but quite hard to use because it's such a distinct species of tree from a very particular part of the world. It's okay, you can't complain at free DLC, right? So you certainly can't pass on it. If you want some extra free unique buildings, then just get this DLC for free. But for the majority of my cities, I tend to not include the 3 uniques that I brought with this pack. So it's C tier, but at the end of the day, it's free DLC. You can't complain. It's worth grabbing. Next up is another cosmetic pack, and this is the Stadiums one, which kind of ties into the Matchday pack as well. I'm going to have to put this into Passable because you can't actually get it anymore. So the Stadiums DLC was essentially an expansion for the Matchday DLC, and it added in 4 real-life stadiums, and these were Chelsea's Stamford Bridge, Barcelona's Nou Camp, the Juventus Stadium for Juventus, and PSG's Parc des Princes. It was removed from the store because Paradox only had a 1-year license for this pack. Obviously, you're kind of working with football brands and there's lots of legal licensing involved with that. So it's not actually available anymore. If you didn't get it within the time frame when it was released in 2016, it was only around for 11 months and then it's gone, which is a little bit of a shame. But the workshop is there for PC players to go ahead and get a bunch of new stadium assets. It would have been cool to still have these assets in the game, some actual real-life stadiums alongside the kind of base football stadium that was added with that Matchday DLC. But, for those that are familiar with football or soccer, there is very complicated licensing issues involved with using their kind of brand names and official stadiums. So if you did get it, well done. It's nice to have some new real-life stadiums in. If you didn't, it's not available anymore. So for that reason, it has to fall into Passable. I will also talk about the tethered mini expansion, the Matchday DLC here as well. It did add in the new football stadium, and we also got some new policies, which was the free public transport on match days, come one, come all. Match security, which hires security personnel to keep the crime low around the stadium. I've never had an issue with crime around stadiums. Again, police stations handle this more than enough. And then also the subsidised youth policy, which came in, which spends money on training young players to increase the odds of your team winning. This policy is crazy expensive to put on, so again, I've never used it. The team tends to win 9 times out of 10 anyway in my cities. So there's not too much to say about these stadium and matchday DLCs. So for me, they're going to fall into Passable purely because you can't actually get stadiums anymore. And the matchday DLC, it adds in a new stadium and some fairly pointless policies. So again, it's pretty Passable. Next up, we have the Train Stations Content Creator Pack by Bad Peanut, and this is going into a must buy. For some reason, across all the expansions and DLCs, we hadn't really had any new train stations added, and this content creator pack fixes all of that. It introduces 12 new stations, 6 for train and 6 for metro, and 4 new transport hubs. And one of my favourite thing about this train station content creator pack is that it adds layers of depth into the map, which is something I didn't really realise the game needed. I'm always kind of talking about layers of height and that eventual crawl up to the peak of the skyline to help create more authentic looking cities. But being able to see these little open holes, especially with the metro stations here, kind of looking down into the ground and seeing the city alive down there, that made such a huge difference. I really didn't realise it was something we needed. And I think we can all agree that the Metro Plaza added with this content creator pack is probably the most satisfying asset in the game to watch, especially when all of the metro lines are hooked in. And this transport hub, I think in my experience anyway, it's the busiest transport hub, having this many metro lines converge at one point. It's just amazing. I really like it. The glassbox transport hub on the old market station and the crossover train station hubs are also really nice. And the metro stations brought in, there's obviously 6 metro stations, kind of 3 elevated and 3 underground. They look a lot nicer and a lot more impressive than the base game metro stations. Just a huge improvement to 2 really busy key methods of public transport that I think most of us end up using in the form of metro and trains. The train stations, again, they have bypass lines now, which is great, so international and cargo trains can go straight through the station. Really helps with that train traffic buildup if there's a problem you're having within your city. And just the design and the architecture around these assets, they just look so good. Like Bad Peanut, what a modder. He absolutely nailed them. Really good content creator pack, and so much better than the base game stations. And if you're not a fan, or don't have access to the workshop to download different types of train station asset, then the train stations content creator pack makes a huge difference to your metro and train systems in the city. And I think I've found myself now almost entirely stopped using the base game train station and metro stations because Bad Peanut's assets are just so much nicer. Really nice. Love train stations. Absolutely a must-buy content creator pack in my opinion. Next up, we have University City content creator pack, and this for me is going into A tier. So it's a very similar vibe to European Suburbia. It adds in 32 new low-density commercial buildings, 36 low-density residential buildings, and 15 props, including signs and stuff like that. The only thing that kind of annoys me about this pack, I guess we'll get this out of the way first, is that you can't specialize a zone to spawn these buildings like you can with European Suburbia. I don't know why they made it like that. It seems kind of weird that you can't specialize a painted out district to only spawn in University City assets. If you want it to function like that, then you do need the themes manager mod. So kind of a downside, I guess, to the pack. That's really the negative about it. The assets that were made by Michael Warren, who is the designer behind this pack, are really nice, much more realistic looking low density commercial buildings. Again, they're not plastered in that neon signage that City Skylines seems to be obsessed with. You get some really nice kind of like skybar assets, some nice kind of old red brick looking commercial that have these archways on the front. The residential buildings, some of them have quite a rundown vibe, which can be really helpful for building lower income areas or perhaps a little more rural. The University City buildings serve those purposes really nicely. And it's a great addition of a whole bunch of low density residential and commercial buildings, which is great. It's always nice to see some more variation in our zonings. And we use low density res and commercial a lot in the city, so it's nice just to see some extra assets in that pool. Like I said, the only real downside is the fact we can't specialise districts to get these assets to show specifically without the themes manager mod, but that certainly doesn't pull it any further down the tier list than A. I'm a huge fan of these assets, and they're often kind of my go-to when using either Rico or Plot the Growables to kind of really heavily decorate commercial districts because they're just so nice. Michael Warren did a really good job of modelling these assets. There's some really nice like takeaway looking joints, some like fast food places. The residentials have these little porches and kind of like rundown gardens behind them. I often end up using the University City assets over the base game vanilla assets now instead. And when you start combining European Suburbia and University City assets together, you get much more unique looking districts. Yeah, it's really cool. Again, only downside is you can't specialise a district, but University City, really good content creator pack, and certainly one you should maybe consider picking up first. Next up on the content creator tier list is concerts, and I'm going to move this into B tier. So concerts was never actually released on the consoles, it was never particularly explained why, but it gives us 4 unique buildings, which is the festival area itself, which moves through 3 different kind of tiers or levels, if you will: fan zone park, a music club, and a media broadcast building. I'm a huge fan of the music club and media broadcast uniques. They work kind of away from their intended purpose. The music club in particular has a really nice kind of red brick design and works quite nicely within kind of older areas or perhaps a European themed build. So we actually did a modular build on a festival area because I think it's one of the harder uniques to place, and this thing takes absolutely years to move to its final level. You'll be waiting a long time for this to hit level 3. And its appearance does change with each stage of its levels as well, which is quite nice. You can also add in 2 new policies onto the festival area itself as well, which is an ad campaign, which increases the popularity of the bands by +1 per month, which is a criteria you need to help this level up. And the media broadcast building, also included in this pack, increases the effectiveness of those ad campaigns by 20%. So that's pretty cool. And there's also a premium studio, which will increase the chance of a successful concert at a cost of 3,000 a week, which is pretty expensive. So I'm going to put it middle of the road. One, because I haven't really played with it that much. I do like the uniques, but the festival area itself just takes a long time to level up and can be quite hard to place. And the fact that this didn't release on consoles seems a little bit unfair to the console players. I had a little Google search and couldn't find a reason why it wasn't released. Maybe you guys know below. But either way, it's certainly not a bad expansion. It doesn't qualify as a content creator pack. It's actually a mini DLC, kind of like the match day one was. It's okay if you're on the PC and you want to play with some of the uniques and maybe develop like a music festival area, which we will have a modular build for in the top right corner of the screen here if you want to go check that out. But context is okay, middle of the road, not bad, not amazing. It's going to go for B tier for me. Last but certainly not least is the Modern Japan content creator pack, and I'm going to drag this up into a must buy. So Modern Japan adds in 20 buildings and 6 props, which are all designed by the modder Ryuichi Kaminogi. I'm probably heavily butchering that name, so apologies if I am. But the assets that this pack add in are absolutely amazing, the vast majority of which are very much focused into adding in to your downtowns, especially with the office skyscraper, company headquarters, the high-rise building, the station department, and the rail yard shopping centre. There's also some really nice looking office buildings like the small office building, district office, the register office, city office building, just downtown hotels. It's just really good. Like, these make such a difference to your downtown buildings, and they're usually kind of my go-to when I'm crafting that skyline, especially the office skyscraper. And the office skyscraper is the second tallest asset behind Art Deco's P-Now Street now, and it just dominates your skyline so well. Really nice. It also adds in various kind of little drive-in oriental restaurants as well that come with car park decals out the front, which for those without mods, it's nice to see some kind of car parking asset within the city, because every city has car parking everywhere pretty much. And the smaller little oriental drive-through restaurants make really good highway rest stop assets. We use these all the time. Especially the service station and restaurant asset is the largest one, but you can also get away with bringing in the Oriental Market or the Noodle Restaurant in as well. Just really, really nice assets. There's also 2 new service buildings in the form of a general hospital, which serves as a new hospital, which is nice. And again, it's a much more realistic looking hospital, and the waste disposal unit is another way to process garbage. It's not one I particularly use often. I tend to lean into Sunset Harbour's waste processing complexes more to deal with garbage in the city, but it's nice to have the waste disposal unit there from the Japanese content creator pack if you want to use that as well. So a ton of unique buildings and a couple of service assets, you can't really complain, but it's the way that these assets look. Ryuichi did a wonderful job of modelling these assets, and they just make an enormous difference to my downtown districts, office park builds, and highway rest stop areas. They're kind of my go-to now, especially with the office skyscraper in the company headquarters. They're kind of the 2 assets I place first when I'm looking to build the downtown areas, because they're such perfect high-rise assets. They look really good, rise above the skyline. So I can't imagine crafting a downtown area without Modern Japan. So for me, it's going to fall into an absolute must-buy content creator pack. Okay guys, that is going to do it for today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, likes, comments and shares below really help me out. Equals much if you haven't enjoyed it, please feel free to leave a dislike as well. Just a quick thank you again for all the support on these tier lists. That first public transport one's on like 47,000 views now, which is really good for me. So I'm really glad you're enjoying them. I'm happy to keep making them. We will definitely do a vanilla map ranking across all the DLCs and expansions. That one will take a little longer to make, so we'll probably do that one next. But if you have any requests for themes on more of these tier lists, as always, drop them down in the comments below. But otherwise, I will shut up and we'll leave it there. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.